The following content may contain sensitive themes that is not suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
As human beings, we're designed to be relational. We don't know who we are unless we're relating. It's one of those things that comes with relationships because it's bound to be there. After the pandemic, people no longer know how to be present in person in their embodied selves. There will never be a perfect balance. Like if someone is feeling 30 and another person is feeling 20, are we okay to be a 50% functional couple today?
Relationships are tricky. And they're tricky because they're also a core part of all our lives. They're such a fundamental aspect of how we live as human beings. So what we've actually done is gotten a bunch of questions from all of you and brought in an expert on relationships. Smiti Srivastava works with so many people on relationship issues, and she and I are going to talk about all of those questions and everything around it today. I've spent so much time thinking about how this conversation should flow because the number of times I've gotten messages online, people asking about loneliness, people are talking about relationships. They're bringing up things around how they even build a relationship, how they look at friendships, and especially in today's time. And my standard response has always been, I am not a certified expert. I am not a certified, I haven't studied psychology. I haven't done any of those. And so I said, how do you kind of bring it together? And you and I happen to get in touch. It's a big good way to kind of have a conversation on relationships. And I'm hoping it's the start of many conversations on relationships, because there's not like one conversation on relationships. No. But I want to start by asking is like, I know this is an area that you've kind of focused on. What kind of led you to think this is obviously a large part of it, but what is your perspective on relationships?
My perspective on relationships is that there is no way out of it. I feel like as human beings, we're designed to be relational. We're relational beings, so we don't know who we are unless we're relating. And that's why the quest for connection is forever going. And, romantic relationships in particular are ones that we kind of experiment with our personalities with. We try to understand how we are in relation to another person, how they are going to meet our needs. So it's not something one can kind of avoid or steer clear from.
That's actually one of the core things, right? There's a tendency for people to believe that we are on individual journeys in life. But more often than not, it's all about who you're with and who. I was reading something on happiness, and it said that the core research has shown that the fundamental happiness is any form of human connection, and that's where it stems. Like everything is going to be that. No matter what you might achieve, no matter what you might do, what you might want to purchase for what you think will give you happiness, comes down to the relationships in your lives. And then I came across this quote. I think Esther Perel said this, right? It's like the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your lives. Yes. And I said, that is so true. And I kind of put out there and asked people what questions they had on relationships. And we'll come into some of those in this conversation. But I want to kind of start off by also asking you, saying, if you look at today's world, we are so connected, yet we are so disconnected from each other. Are you seeing specific areas of disconnection that is coming primarily from the fact that so much of it is online?
Yeah, actually Sherry Turkle talks about it in her book Together But Alone, that we are connected up in this world where everything is instantly available to us. So when something is instantly available to us, it means that there is no room for us to think and reflect on ourselves. And we're often kind of trying to only at best catch up. Once that's done and there's no room for reflecting on yourself, that leads to huge moments of disconnections when that stimulation is absent. So, you might feel like you've zoned out. That's a common way of kind of saying it, that I've zoned out, or you're just slowing down from all of that mental stimulation and you're just quiet. Sometimes people just like to lie down in bed and stare at the ceiling because your brain is overstimulated. So that's a big way in which disconnection shows up every day.
Because of that disconnection showing up, it almost drives this point of saying people want to be connected, but you also are so stimulated all the time that, like you said, you're not able to really truly connect with someone. And then there's another perspective which is saying, okay, you are in a relationship because you're going to have some form of physical intimacy, etc., which is a perception that is reasonably prevalent. And so, like, what's the point of truly connecting? I mean, I'm swiping right, and I'm from a pre-Tinder time. Never used the apps, but if I'm just a swipe right, and you know what the eventual aim is, do I even need to know you? Which I feel is also making people lose what the whole point is.
Yeah. I feel like we need to think about what problem this is arising out of. And the way in which I see it, it's a lot to do with loneliness. Because the need to constantly be connected and then feeling like you failed at it and then wanting to try again. The distress really there is that you're not able to stay with yourself or tolerate that there are these moments, fleeting moments, where these connections are missing, so it could lead to kind of like a compulsive need to find connection, which ironically leads to poor quality of connections. And you will find that your attention span is very short because you know what you're looking for. You're looking for the next dopamine kick, and you don't find it with one person. You'll almost freeze that conversation there and move to the next one. There are so many options. You don't need to waste your time working it out with one person.
Loneliness has to be one of the pieces that I've been asked the most about, and I'm like, I still haven't found a way to explain how do you deal with loneliness. And because at one point we're also talking to the world saying, you need to kind of also relish being alone, because being by yourself is so important for you to kind of just reflect and kind of figure out what you've been through, where you are, and where you kind of going to go. But being alone by yourself isn't you being lonely. But most people who I end up speaking to, I mean, people who just send a DM across or just kind of ask me, they're all struggling with saying, how do I not feel so lonely?
I think it's one of those things that comes with relationships because it's bound to be there. There are two ways in which we experience this feeling. One is from an external stimuli, where we are pushed into that space of loneliness, where you don't feel like you're able to have friends or make it to work, or kind of connect with your external world. And the second one is when you call yourself into a space of solitude. And the second one is where we kind of talk about being able to be with yourself, building that kind of relationship with yourself. Are you able to say no to others when there is an option of meeting, but say that, no, I don't want to meet right now. I want to be with myself.
Yeah.
So, but that is not so much loneliness. And when people say that they're feeling lonely, oftentimes it's because they don't want to call themselves into moments of solitude. And they are very interested in wanting to be connected to the external world, but they're unable to do it.
When we talk about loneliness, one of the things that also comes across is the fact that people just want to be heard. They've also, I feel at some point, not figured out a way to connect in person anymore.
Yeah.
Would you say that the pandemic has done that, or was it before there as well? What do you see as the root cause?
Yeah. 100%. At least it's showing up a lot in my work and also the research that is recently published. It tells us that after the pandemic, people no longer know how to be present in person, in their embodied selves. We don't know what it's like to hold a conversation. We don't know how to talk without the crutch of the device. And there is a lot of anxiety about going back into workspaces or even meeting friends, into relation or going into a relationship, because everything has to sync up. Like, you have to feel okay, you have to feel in the mood, you have to be used to having a conversation that flows. You cannot buy time and be smart about it. It has to happen in real time.
Yeah.
And the pandemic gave us a lot of luxury of doing something what we call is reconstructing your identity online. So you'd see a lot of creators and a lot of people who used devices to kind of enhance parts of their personalities that they find desirable to be out there a
Yeah.
lot. You know, that's
Yeah.
that's happening a lot, and that's for, let's say, one kind of an audience, that's for creators. But for everyday people as well, for users, what has happened is that the expectation is raised, that this is what I have to expect of a person and of myself.
Yeah.
I don't know how to deliver, I don't know how to talk to someone.
When you also look at the online dating experience, what also ends up happening is that because it's so, I mean, algorithmic in that sense, that you're just seeing a photograph, you're seeing something written, or in some cases it flows a certain way. You're not, you know that it's almost like not a choice of one, but a choice of many.
Yeah.
But if also when no one is choosing you, you also kind of feel that sense of, oh my God, like no one's going to hear me or no one's going to see me.
Yeah.
And you're in this weird circle of let's keep our options open. So you're not tapping into any option at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that means that there is no depth in the connections you are establishing in the first place. And people who struggle with this are also people who struggle with their self-esteem. Because what the problem really is that we don't know how to relate with ourselves. And do we find ourselves desirable? Do we feel like we can stay with ourselves? Is solitude okay? When I don't have this filter on my photograph, do I like how I look?
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, the pandemic especially was a very long period of time where we could play with this.
Yeah.
You could be who you wanted to be, and now it's very difficult to go back into the office or meeting friends.
Yeah. And when you finally end up meeting someone in person, it's, you're not picking up where you left off in many ways, because you built a persona for yourself. You've built almost a certain, I don't know if fake is the right word, but you have layered some things onto yourself, right? Could be just, you know what your right angles are. You only taking photos on this angle.
Yeah.
You've cut off certain parts because you don't want to show certain parts.
Yeah.
You've also started to communicate in a way that is, I call it human clickbait.
Yeah.
Like you function like human clickbait because you believe that's what will get someone to tap onto that heart button.
Yeah.
Will get them to respond. But you can't replicate that in regular conversation, and suddenly everyone's like, one second, this is not the person I knew, or this is not the person I met online.
Yeah, it's not. And so there are so many elements just now in this entire segment that you just talked about. One is that we don't know if someone is able to heart us, like when we're present in front of each other. We don't know if you actually like what I'm saying, or how, to what extent do you want to engage with me? Do you just want to like it? Do you want to comment? So now the way in which we're relating is through the language of technology and the internet. So we don't know how to translate that or to kind of find a good substitute for that offline anymore.
So is there a way back, or are we now stuck to saying, okay, I walk around with human like buttons and like subscribe and like bell icons?
There is a way back. There will always be the innate need to relate in person, and that I think no amount of advanced technology can replace that. Humanness can't be recreated. That's something we're born with.
So much of how we communicate is now through, it's like, don't call me text. And now this text is now maybe a voice note, or let's just catch up online. And obviously there was the long period of COVID where we were all in lockdown, where I remember catching up with friends over a Zoom call, and it never felt the same. I'm so happy to have that back. But I feel for a lot of people, it's also became a way to normalize not getting out of your house. Like for me, that was it.
Yeah.
The standing joke about me used to be that I would never want to leave my PIN code, and then eventually became Varun does not leave his house to not want to leave a couple of rooms in the house. And I was just like, this is my safe space.
Yeah.
And so it's almost self-inflicted as well, like you said, right? It's like I don't want to take the chance of crossing that line.
Yeah. I think that comes so much from A, being overstimulated and needing that space for yourself, and B, there's a lot of pressure to keep up with the online identity you are projecting and displaying. So it's very, there's a lot of pressure to kind of be consistent with who you are online. Say you're wearing a certain kind of attire and you're looking very presentable, because we do have the luxury of time when we're we're in touch through devices. The luxury of saying I'll reply to you later means that I have the opportunity to give you the best answer. I have the opportunity to give you, to not disappoint you. I have the opportunity to keep you in anxiety and buy some time for myself and say, okay, I want you to, understand from my silence that I'm not interested. So it's a very non-confrontational kind of a space when the device comes into the picture. And when you remove the device, you're immediately in the world full of confrontation. Like, you have to be Varun even outside, behind the screen, right?
Yeah.
So that's quite
Like there's no mute
stressful.
button.
Yeah.
There's no switching off your camera.
No.
And it's like that visual of two people on a date with both on their phones in my head is always like when you were saying that, that's literally the visual that came into my head, because that it becomes your safe space.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
safe when you're communicating through the phone. And I've often sat and have this weird habit where, you will see some people on another table and you'll think about what they might be talking about. When I see two people talk on their phones, I'm like, are they chatting with each other? Like, is this what's happening there? Are in the physical space, going on a date, chatting with each other on WhatsApp? It's just them. And that makes me think about the fact that, is this also because, like you said, we're so conflict averse now?
Yeah.
We've found a way to evade any form of conflict. We've found a way to evade any argument. And a couple of questions we got were about how do you deal with conflict in a relationship? And oftentimes that's what makes you run away from even having one.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
Yeah. I think conflicts in general are a very distressing space for any human to be in. So, if you've been raised in a family where conflicts were not addressed in a healthy way, with resolutions towards the end of it, then chances are you don't see conflicts as a safe place to get into at all. So you would avoid that at any cost, because the meaning for you is, if I get into a conflict, it means ultimate destruction and end of this relationship.
Yeah.
I cannot do this at all. It's not safe for me. On the other hand, there are some people who don't know any other way but to relate through conflicts.
Yeah.
Because that's the way they have established safe relationships. They're like, no, but I need to negotiate. I need to tell you what I feel, and you need to tell me how you feel. So conflicts become a very big part of relating. I kind of lost track of your question.
No, but I think what you said
Yeah.
was, I think it's so pertinent, right? Because what you said about conflict also becomes about how I feel and how I want you to respond to it
Yeah.
in a relationship. And what ends up happening is, if you're different kinds of personalities, what if I'm the kind of person who doesn't want to do this way right now? I need to be by myself first before I can actually communicate, versus if the other person's like, no, I want to talk about this now.
Yeah.
That's not just conflict. That is generally saying that just almost leads to a breakdown of communication.
Yeah, it does. And what usually helps in those cases is, to buy yourself some time and reflect on this and say, okay, it looks like we're getting into a very, this is not going anywhere.
Yeah. It's a finger pointing
Yeah,
scenario now.
and kitchen sinking,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly,
Yeah. So we're doing that. So can we come back to this? Because I feel like I need to gather my thoughts about what I'm feeling. I've heard you out, and I am going to respond to you. So if you're a person who avoids conflict, that's something to say. And if you're someone who's chasing conflict, then it might be a moment to reflect on and think about, okay, it looks like I'm deeply upset with you all the time.
Yeah.
So I need to think about where my expectations are.
That leads to a few things, right? The term ghosting came up much later in my vocabulary. But when I think back on when I was younger and I've had relationships, I was so conflict averse that I would rather just kind of disappear rather than break up and actually have that conversation. It's almost this feeling of, and I've spent time reflecting on this, right? You almost feel like, do I really want to go through that discomfort? And you will just like say, it's that SMS at that point of time, not even a WhatsApp message, which is a terrible way to end a relationship.
Yeah.
But it's also like you're trying to find a way to make yourself safe, saying, I don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
So how do you look at, even if the conflict is leading to a breakup, how does someone look at it and say, no, this is the way to, in a healthy way, break a relationship or even just mend one? Like how do you have that Because it's very tough to find that way to have the conversation, which seems like we like to joke at home saying, how do we have this conflict conversation like you're two people in therapy? How do you bring yourself to that point?
I feel like what you're talking about has so much to do with communication in general. You know, are we able to communicate when we're feeling like there is fear in the room? Or do we feel like we need to flee? So, you know, I think a good way to begin would be to reflect on what you want in the first place. So if, you know, like you described that, you know, when you're in, you're very, what was the word?
Ghosting.
Conflict averse.
Conflict averse.
You've been quite conflict averse. So, you know, I think the thing to focus on would be, how do I make this safe for me, and to really reflect on what are the triggers for me that are causing me to run away. So it, you know, in some cases it could be the partner or the friend raising their voice, or to incessantly kind of messaging you and calling you, or those kind of behaviors, and to identify them and tell your partner to be like, this is causing me to run away. Can we put a pause here? And think about what's going on for us, because I want to talk about my feelings, and I don't know the resolution till I invite you into the conversation. You know,
And this isn't normalized, right?
Yeah.
I feel the big problem here is that, you know, when you're growing up, you hear about sweep under the rug. This doesn't have to be a conversation. I remember watching there's this Telugu movie I like to watch again and again, and there's this one scene which I think back to, where protagonist says that when a couple's having a conversation and they shut their door versus they leave the door open, it means different things. Is that saying a conflict should not be shown to the world. Versus leave the door open, you think it's fine. This is how a relationship is. Everybody can see it. And so that's such an important point. Is that I feel it's ingrained, I think, culturally, that having an argument is bad, or having some form of conflict is bad, that it will lead to you breaking up, it will lead to you being, again, alone, lonely, all that stuff. Versus conflict is actually good. It's healthy if you treat it in a, like, okay, we're doing this, it's a process to find a better way to do it. So it's so cultural, right? I think back on every single form of conflict I've seen growing up across every person who was a grown-up person around me, and I'm like, it just wasn't normalized.
Yeah, it wasn't. And what you're talking about, it brings to mind theories about collectivist societies and South Asia, you know, particularly like the film you're referring to, Indian families, and in general, marriages are not seen as an individualistic unit. So the symbolism of the door being open, it holds a lot of meaning, because what you're also saying is that I need a third person here to see what's happening. I may need intervention. I don't trust that I can resolve this with my partner on my own. And if the doors are closed, then I have to decide. I have to take the accountability of everything that goes down here.
And that also kind of leads you into, it's also a question of trust, right?
Yeah.
And I feel we don't talk about trust enough when it comes to relationships. Well, it's very easy to say that, you know, if you're in a marriage or in a relationship, you don't trust each other. But no one says how. Like, how do you bring that trust? And because that doesn't just happen. It happens through a process. What have you seen as good ways to build trust, especially when you see it kind of breaking?
I think good ways to build trust would be to talk about why it's missing. And to say, you did XYZ thing on this day, so I feel like I'm not able to trust you about it again. Or you know, if I haven't been trusted in the past when I've told my truth, so I don't think I can share with you my experiences. To kind of say the truth about why you're not able to trust really softens the conversation, and it makes room for possibility. Possibility is all that's needed when you are trying to trust. You know, trust thrives on the possibility of something becoming better. So once that's invited into the conversation, it's going to be there. But you need to know you need to know that you have to keep inviting trust back into the conversation. It's not going to always be there. You'll have to keep calling it back in.
Are trust and respect correlated in a relationship?
Wow, that's an interesting one. I don't think so, but I do think they have some overlaps. Like, there are people who trust toxic and abusive partners to behave in predictable manners, but that doesn't mean that they respect them. Trust forms some kind of predictability as well. That I know if I say something to you, you're going to respond in XYZ way, and I know where this will go. It doesn't also say that the way in which you're responding is good for me or the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think when in cases where it's not good for the relationship, you may not trust you may not respect the person.
Yeah.
But you will trust that this conversation will happen and that explosion will happen, and you will fall back into that kind of cycle again. So,
And I like the fact that you use the word cycle, right? Because that's
Yeah.
the one thing I feel I blame movies for this. It's that whole happily ever after, that ending, which is there, is because every relationship is a cycle.
Yeah.
Like me and my wife Pooja, we married for 10 years. And we often talk about how our relationship has evolved. And it's always, it's never a this or a this. It's a constant flow like this.
Yeah.
So we're almost ready for, okay, when this happens, now we know how to deal with it better. So if you deal with it like, I know it's going to be this flow,
Yeah.
I know how to deal with it better the next time there is some form of this thing where we have to kind of do with it. So the dip becomes lesser. Then it becomes a little bit more linear in that sense is what we've seen. But it's taken us years to almost in a way focus on the fact that this is how relationships need to evolve. Instead of saying that, no, this is how I am. This is because that used to be my tendency. My tendency used to be to say to any relationship, get into it and say, it's almost like mutual funds subject to market risk, saying that this is how I am. I will do this. I will make it about me.
Yeah.
I will at some point zone of course work comes in. I used to give this list of things. And I think back on that saying that was me feeling like I was giving the other person almost tools to eventually break up with me. But in hindsight, that also showed the other person almost like a barrier, right? Like you can't come across beyond this barrier. Do you see that happening a lot?
Yeah. This what you're describing sounds like a disclaimer. Like, here
Yeah.
is what comes with me if you date
Exactly.
me, and you take it or you go. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Exactly. That used to be my thing.
Yeah, this is how it's going to be. And I'm trying to see it from a place of compassion. And I'm thinking, if someone has to do that, if someone has to give you a memo of how to relate with them, that says so much about how they don't have an internalized one for themselves. And so all you know is what doesn't work with you. So you're telling you're trying to connect and saying, this doesn't work with me, that doesn't work with me, this won't work. So if you're okay with the negatives, then you come.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's self-criticism, right? And that has been, I feel, the thing I've worked on the most through therapy.
Yeah.
Has been how critical I am of my own self. It's that one relationship we don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
Which is like our own relationship with ourselves, how we judge ourselves, how we look at ourselves, and almost like dig into it and say, if we're judging ourselves so much, how can you expect someone to even like you, right? It becomes that you almost build that box of which you're sitting inside and judging yourself, which goes across how you are in a relationship, how long they go on, deals with how you feel about yourself. I think everything stems from that. It's just self-judgment, right?
Yeah. And you're almost expecting someone to judge you. So before they can do that, you've judged yourself and you've kind of been like, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And
Take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. Take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
But also there's a promise that, but if you're with me, then I am. And there's
I've told you.
Yeah. There'll
Don't say
always
it,
be
tell
that as well.
It's this weird form of safety net for safety net building yourself, but you're also like engaging yourself within it and saying, I can't get out of it.
Yeah.
And and I tell this to her often, and I put it on record enough times, saying that I finally did end up with someone who said, no, you're not allowed to do that. I don't buy any disclaimer. I don't buy the fact that you can't change. Don't buy this stuff. And so that is when actually I would say the first threads of me even saying I could evolve came by finally meeting someone who said, no, that's not how you need to look at it.
Yeah.
And then eventually I did some of that to her. And then we did that back and forth. And that's how I talk about my marriage, that we have this evolution of being there for each other when you are judging yourself the most, or when you're at your lowest point, is when you need to kind of be there.
Yeah.
And that's when you actually enjoy the high points.
Yeah. Yeah, you described that graph to me, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking that that is what you've essentially built is a way to communicate and negotiate terms of the relationship. So there will always be lows, there will always be highs. It's taken several years to kind of have a robust way of communicating.
Yeah.
So, but that's something that people take for granted. Or, earlier what you were saying, you blame movies for this. The romanticizing of, kind of in fluctuations in relationship, or that there's a magic pill that there'll be a song that'll play, or we'll have this one moment where we look at each other and we'll just know.
Oh my God.
That's not going to happen. You will have to talk.
There are so many things I think that's an entire series of episodes to talk about the things people have learned about how romance needs to work and how relationship needs to work by looking at movies in general.
Yeah,
Oh man, that's a whole series to itself.
absolutely. Yeah.
But where else do people learn? That's also a thing, right? Like you learn from who you're surrounded by when you're growing up.
Yeah.
You learn from movies.
Yeah.
You learn from popular culture. Is there now finally, are we at a point finally where like, there are other resources to finally learn from? Because you can go on the internet, which is also not necessarily a good thing. Because you learn all the worst things about relationships on the internet as well.
Yeah. I feel like Instagram is becoming a popular space for learning, by the way. So social media, I think, is another space where people choose to learn, where you can log on to the app and you can decide today what topic am I going to read about, listen to something about. And so in addition to movies and primary caregivers, there's also this bit of social media. And I'm sure you would know, based on the audience that you have, that there is so much knowledge sharing and exchange of information happening just by virtue of them listening to you and you sharing pieces of your life.
One of the I won't even call her creator. I think someone I follow online is this mental health expert called Nedra Twab.
Yeah.
And she writes a lot about boundaries.
Yeah.
I didn't know what boundaries were as a term till I came across a book first and then her content, and it kind of got me into the fact that just the concept of space and boundaries is so absent from any conversation or anything you've learned about relationships ever. Because if you go by how you saw relationships, it was never a term.
Yeah.
So for someone who doesn't get what space or boundaries mean in a relationship, what would you tell them?
I think, firstly, I want to respond to the times in which we are. I feel like the conversation of space and boundaries, it's so new, and it's happening now when we have our devices at our hands. So everything is accessible quite fast, which means there are no boundaries.
Yeah.
So when several people have the same kind of experience, then we bring language into the picture and we say, what is this experience we're having? Oh, it's lack of boundaries. I'm being called on to my phone all the time, or I have to be hyper present.
Yeah.
So boundaries. Okay, what else is it? It's space. I feel like these issues were always there, but it's more so now because there is a lack of boundaries. I could look up a person and find out so many things about them without their consent.
So how do you build it into a relationship then? Let's say you're in a relationship and the whole conversation around boundaries and space comes up.
Yeah.
Because when the assumption, and I've seen this happen, right, is that when someone says they want some space, it's almost like, what, 1 second, you don't want to be around me? Is an instinctive response. I mean, it's so natural for all of us to say that. Or when someone, this is my boundary, it's almost like saying, how do you even say no? It feels like a very no-esque thing to say. And it's not just about, I think, romantic relationship, right? It's professional, it's how you deal with friends. It's that we've never been taught about how to say that in a way that won't make the other person get offended.
Yeah, or feel rejected. Yeah. I think there is a term for this in psychology. We call it containment. And it starts when we're very little. It starts in the presence of a primary caregiver. So containment happens when, in the presence of a mother, an infant is able to mind their own business and play, but they're not engaging with each other. She could be doing her own thing, and the infant could be doing their own thing. If this hasn't happened enough, then moving on in your adult life, you're not going to be able to have a healthy way of doing it. So, asking for space or giving space becomes an issue. So how do we do that in adult relationships? One way would be to kind of build moments of containment and say, let's both do something that needn't be the same things. We can be around each other, be in the same house, but can we be okay with that? Can we try doing that and be able to trust that the other person isn't rejecting us, but they're just around. More moments of those, I think, help in building healthier spaces and boundaries.
It goes back to that conflict averseness, goes back to the fact that I remember someone wrote to me and said, I want to build some space, but I'm worried that the other person might just drift away. And it's also that worry that I found someone. Where they go away. And so we would use words like clingy, I remember when I was younger, and they would be word like clingy or chipku, popularly used terms. You would also have scenarios where it's saying possessiveness. It all comes from the fact that, oh my God, if I give space, what if you go away? What if this changes? But change is inevitable, right?
It is inevitable. And there is a lot of shame that is assigned to needing someone in the first place. This chipku and clingy is, and for someone who needs that, they're coming from a space of affection. And for someone who's not able to deliver, they try to shame, because again, you're talking about being conflict averse. What we're not confronting in this moment is that I don't have the bandwidth to give you that kind of attention just now. And that's different to me not wanting to do it at all. I care about you, I love you, and I want to be there for you. But can I do it just now and demonstrate that? Probably not. I need some time. Are we able to address that? Do we feel fearful of where that conversation would go?
You feel also kind of stems from the fact that, there was a question that came in, which is that what's the most important thing in a relationship? Is it love or commitment? And I feel it comes from that, right? We make relationship all about love, or it's all about commitment. So there's all these words not. But what is the most important thing?
It's neither.
So what is it?
It's the intentionality that underpins every successful relationship. So, if we romanticize that a relationship can only be successful if either love or commitment are, forefronting the relationship, then when either of them are a little lower, we feel very threatened. But if your intentionality to make it work is in the right place, you can play around with a lot of factors then. Like you could say, today I'm not feeling like I'm very committed, or today I'm not feeling so much love for you. But my intention is to make it work. And if I'm able to communicate that, I will always make it work. Because that is my goal. My goal is not to find love all the time. That is exhausting.
It can also feel exhausting and suffocating, right? And that's the core of any relationship which we miss, is that what we expect from friends, what we expect from someone within a let's say a romantic relationship, what we expect from our parents and what parents expect from their children. You never set an intention.
No.
You set expectation.
You
have set I think expectation is the word. I can't think of a better word, because that is the expectation is this is what it is. But this is not what I'm feeling, but okay. I'll stick to it.
And as parents, then do we communicate to the children that this is an expectation because the intention is that you get XYZ out of this. So the child knows that even if they are not able to do what is expected of them, they can work another way around that intention. And that intention can still be in place. So we don't have those conversations, because we don't know how to. I think these are coming from moments of reflection. Like, look at you and I. We're talking just now, and we're reflecting on what's happening. This is where it's coming from.
I was talking to someone older, in their 60s. I'm like, have you thought about going for therapy? And they're like, I went once. Therapist told me everything which I already knew. And I thought that's such an important point on therapy to itself. Because we believe we're going to learn something new. But therapy is for yourself. So you'll obviously talk about yourself. And you'll obviously go through people, and eventually you have to find someone who works for you with how you want to do it. Are you looking for all the insights from the other end of the conversation, or do you want to be the person? Like, for me, it's more about me just like unloading out there. And then getting one insight at the end of it. But I think for some people, it's more about giving me actionable stuff to do. But I thought the clear point of saying, I've already told me everything which I already knew. is I think the fundamental thing is that it eventually comes down to you. It doesn't come down to anybody else. It's like you got to know more about you
Yeah.
for you to have any form of connection.
Yeah, yeah. And it also says so much about how this person is looking for a magic pill.
Yeah.
That someone out there has the answer. So it's not this therapist. Who is it? Tell me what's going on. Tell me something new. So the idea of not taking accountability and having a magic pill, they go hand in hand. Like what you said,
yeah.
that, boiling down to it comes down to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a term I came across a while back. Because I was told I have it. And then as I was reading more about it, I realized there's a relational word. Is that so? I've been told I have a problem with. I basically tend to need autonomy. So autonomy is an innate need which I have. I used to think I have ADHD, and then I went and I realized that no, actually I have autonomy. But I read this interesting thing the other day, and I think again I was going down the Esther Perel rabbit hole, and she says that she spoke about autonomy versus loyalty in a relationship. And I was like, that's an interesting. I never realized that autonomy makes you not be loyal, or is it about how does that work together? I haven't gotten into that, but I want to ask you, Singh, how does autonomy, for someone who doesn't know what autonomy is, how would you explain autonomy?
How would you describe your experience of? I'm curious because
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how you first thought it was another thing, and then you came upon this.
So I've always had an attention problem.
Yeah.
I tend to not be able to focus on one thing for too long. And
Yeah.
So the obvious thought process is that you say, okay, I have ADHD. And I went through, because that's a term you've heard.
Yeah,
So I would say
yeah.
that out my first
Yeah.
couple of jobs, they all let me do whatever I want to do. While in a meeting's going on, Varun has his laptop open doing something else.
Yeah.
I'm in a relationship and I'm like at some point, like I'm doing something else and not really like paying attention.
Yeah.
No, that's how you, so, and at some point, I think it was Pooja who said this to me saying, can you just not be a fraud and self-diagnose this and actually go to a person who will diagnose you? And so I went and my therapist told me that I have autonomy. And so then and she said, just read up about it and let's talk about it in the next session. So I did that. And the way I put it down in my head was that I don't have an issue focusing on things. It's that you tell me to go from A to B, I'm fine. You tell me how to go from A to B, I have a problem. I can't focus. I can't focus on a path you give me. I have to find my own path. Is my entire
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I look at autonomy.
Yeah. 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 And autonomy in relationships is so important because, having a set path and saying that this is the problem and this is how we will go about it leaves very little room for any kind of growth because there could be a lot of moments of growth and even intimacy that arise out of autonomy.
Yeah. We often look at loyalty as you're loyal to me if you follow the path I've set for you, or I believe that you need to follow for me. But they're not conflicting pieces, right? Look at autonomy, look at loyalty. Are they conflicting? Because I feel that I'm still trying to wrap this around my head. How do you have a loyalty to a person and yet stay autonomous?
Yeah. I think that depends from couple to couple. So, every couple will have their own definition of what loyalty is. And once you've defined that these are non-negotiables for me, and in your quest for being autonomous, you have kind of gone to the territory of the non-negotiables, then I would say it's interfering with the loyalty.
Yeah, because I've often thought about how I react to things and saying, is this my autonomous self, like my need to, and that's also, I feel, over-analyzing as well.
Yeah.
You tend to sit down and it's not everything has to be you sitting and over-analyzing it as well as something which is I've kind of learned is that can also make any form of relationships kind of go down, right? Is that you spend too much time looking at every small thing and trying to find some inference to it. It stops you from actually enjoying the moment.
Yeah. And this is the problem I think a lot of people are facing. This oversimplification of problems as well, that you're behaving like this because your mom was like this with you or your dad was like this. And we've kind of simplified and therapized everyone around us. And we think we have a lot of layers and understanding, but we don't. It's not like that. And when we get into, so the need to analyze is the need to connect. and say that I know what you're saying. Instead of saying I understand what you're saying, we're complicating it and one-upping them and saying I know what you're saying and I know why you're saying it. I know what that means and I know better than you about what you're saying. And that is really flawed. That's a flawed way of communicating. You know?
Yeah, and it comes down to that, because I think back on all the points you've spoken about, right? Communication is so core. Being open to not judging yourself is so core. Being open to having intention is so
Yeah.
core. And I'm looking at some of the questions which we haven't gone through. So some of these I've just integrated into our conversation. But like there are a bunch of people who've written in and really talk about the fact that if you feel like you're with someone, but at the back of your head you're saying, is it wrong for me to also be attracted to someone else? Or is it wrong for me to feel like I deserve maybe someone? I mean, I'm just paraphrasing here a question. It really says that someone who's smarter, funnier, and more handsome.
Yeah.
Is it wrong for me to even feel that way? It's that whole like, or is it more like me look at that? It's not sour grapes. I think the opposite of sour grapes. I think those are. What if I could have that?
Yeah. There's a saying, the forbidden fruit is the sweetest.
Yeah.
And, the idea that you could have another option. And, it's made to sound so sinful when it's a very natural part of just being human. You are going to be attracted to several people across your life, because monogamy is constructed quite socially.
Yeah.
And it was, even marriages are put into place so that, in earlier times, so that property could be passed down to the rightful heir.
It's a contract, yeah.
It is a contract.
Yeah.
And, the idea that romance is not found in the marriage, but outside, or in a relationship, in a monogamous relationship, but you'll be excited by someone outside of it. It is not a thought that we are born with. We're kind of sold this idea. So there's a capitalization of private moments, of moments of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that kind of there's shame attached to that because of that reason. But that doesn't mean we can't have those moments. We're meeting so many people capable and successful, taking care of themselves in a hyper competitive world, all with the agenda of being attractive. And how are you not going to be attracted to them?
I mean, I think earlier today we were sitting, before you kind of came in, some of us were talking together and we were talking about how, like, when you think about the case that happened with, let's say, an Adam Levine or with any of the others, it's literally like, it's that one, someone DMs you, you DM them, and you've seen so many of these things happen, but it's natural for you to look at someone else.
It is, absolutely. It's even healthy. Like if you kind of need some of that to feel attractive to your social environment, in order to feel attractive to your partner.
Yeah.
And also there is a difference between finding someone attractive and finding that normal and acting on that impulse.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could admire someone and think that's amazing. I would want to talk to you, chat with you, etc., etc. But what if I were to go a little further? And so where does that end? That's the question.
Yeah. There's a line there.
Yeah.
There's a line beyond where, and I feel we all innately know where that line is.
Yeah.
So if anybody says, I got carried away or didn't know that line, I feel that they innately know they're lying about it because you know that line.
Yeah.
And that's what actually kind of leads to a spiral. So I totally agree. Like you can be attracted to other people.
Yeah.
And it's actually I find it to be a great conversation piece within couples.
Yeah.
Right. Saying, really that person? Like it's one of those things, right? But if you make that healthy, like that, like what, at least that's what happens at home and after. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And on the other end, you're acting on it.
Yeah.
And when you're acting on it, you're always acting on it in the background, in stealth.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who once told me this, and I could not find a better way to put it. He's like that. Oftentimes when people end up cheating, it's a lot more about how they want to see themselves, rather than how they see the other person.
Yes.
I thought that was so like deep, and this was not a deep person who said it. I'm like, where
Really?
did you get
I'm
this insight from? And he was like, you just said it, and I'm like,
Mm.
But I'd love for you to kind of dig into that aspect.
Yeah. Esther Perel says it as well. She's, I
That's
think,
maybe you heard it there. That's what's happened.
yeah. And, we want to feel the newness of a relationship
Yeah.
is extremely exciting. And the feelings that occur for us, or the changes that your brain goes through, the excitement that your brain goes through, is synonymous to one's when you're on drugs even.
Yeah.
So, it could be very addictive. And when we're not able to recreate moments of excitement and newness in long-term relationships, then where do you find them? You are going to go and talk to someone to feel new, to feel what is the question we're answering? Am I still attractive? Am I still desirable? If this weren't to work out, will I, will this work out somewhere else?
Yeah.
And that is an important question. But where are we trying to answer it?
Something I think Brené Brown said about how she and her husband deal with relationships between them, and she says that they have this way of talking about how much their tank is full. So, like she said, that, like she'll come back home and turn to him and say, "I'm at 30%," which means that I can only give 30% of what is expected.
Yeah.
He'll say, "I'm at like 10 or I'm at 50," and so either you take care of if you're at 30, then the other person takes care of the 70, or you figure a way to get that middle part, taken care of. Like I think her example was on food. I'm at 30%. I'm not going to be able to cook the food what we require. So let's just order it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But I felt that also talked about balance.
Yeah.
And that's something we don't talk about enough in relationships, is that you're balancing each other out. So as much as you might find someone attractive, as much as it might start off at being a physical point. It might be expectations based, etc. But eventually it's about how do you kind of keep that seesaw kind of balanced. What have you seen as, like, if you have to kind of almost do a listicalist version of saying these are the core things that help find balance in the relationship, what would those be?
One is to accept that there will never be a perfect balance. Like if someone is feeling 30 and another person is feeling 20, are we okay to be a 50% functional couple today? That's something that one really needs to build into the relationship, that we'll not always be a fully functional and up on our toes kind of couple. The second one would be, I think, communication. Are we able to communicate about the moments in which we are feeling less excited, less present, but also more excited and more present, and say that I need you to show up for me today, or I need more from you today. Are we able to say that? And I think the third one is my favorite one, which I said before. It's intentionality. My intention is not to create destruction, but I want to know that, whatever you're saying is important to me, what I'm saying is important. And we're not going to fall apart if we put both things on the table. The intention is to make it work. So let's not be scared of our feelings. Let's just say it as it is. And, do we always need to find who is right?
Towards the end of our conversation, I know this can kind of go on, and I have a feeling this is going to be one of many conversations to come. There's a couple of questions here which I think is almost quite, it'd be interesting to kind of close off our conversation with this, is that many people don't have actually asked, saying, how do you even start a relationship? How do you begin one? And in two contexts. One is like, how do you even start one if you met someone?
Yeah.
How do you even start one in a world today where it's so much more about the visual? I think it always has been, but I think because of how social media works, it's about that. So if you feel like, okay, I can't even meet someone. How does someone even find someone is actually a question I've gotten a lot here. And I'm like, I don't know if there's an answer to that.
I think this question has many answers, but a good way to find someone that stays, maybe something one can focus on also, because you could match with many people, let's say on an online dating app, or meet several people you find attractive at a party. But how are you going to hold a conversation or start a conversation and turn that into a relationship? How do you start a relationship? I think that always begins with authenticity. Like, am I able to be real with you? Am I able to say what I really want from this? Or am I going to do a cookie cutter, tell me your favorite XYZ, and, use some pickup lines here and there, or the list goes on. So authenticity. What do you think?
I feel you got to look. I agree with what you just said entirely, and I feel you also have to go look for who the person is rather than who you want them to be.
Yeah.
I feel we all go looking for people, and we try to say, no, that this person will change into
Yeah.
who I want as my partner. And in many cases that does happen, but I feel that if you don't go looking for, okay, they will change and become who I want them to be, and you see, no, they are actually the person I want to be
Yeah.
with. I feel that really helps. I think that's the core part to start with. It's like you're not trying to find this idealized version in your head of
Yeah.
what your partner is going to be like.
Yeah.
But you're going with sync with this person kind of ticks most of my boxes of in reality, not in my own like imaginary head. I'm not doing one like running across in Switzerland scenario in my head. I am going very straight up. This is the person I'm with, and and in reality they are who I need.
Yeah.
And I can hopefully be the person they need, and
Yeah.
to kind of to look at that. For me, that has been core to really like at least changing my perception on relationships.
Yeah.
And also the fact that your job is not to change other people. Your
Yeah.
job is to find someone who you can be with, and you guys can change together.
Absolutely.
And I've always I found that is the best way to look at it.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. There's a term for that. It's a growth-oriented relationship where both people believe in wanting to work things out, or they accept that they're flawed beings in general. And then that's the place from where they start.
Yeah.
They're open to change.
Is this term which I just learned today, right before we got into this conversation, it's called situationship.
Yeah.
Please explain situationship to me. I'm going to end with a definition of what a situationship is because I had no idea this was a thing.
Yeah. Well, situationship is a combination of two words, a situation and a relationship. So it's often the case where there are two people and one person knows that they want to be in a relationship or they want more than the sexual and emotional intimacy that is offered, and the other person doesn't. Sometimes this is conscious and sometimes this is subconscious. When it is not in the awareness of the relationship, they get into a toxic cycle of being okay with the situation and not knowing how to get out of it. But they just know how to be in it. When it is very conscious, it leads oftentimes to an end after a lot of negotiation. Like, are you going to be with me? Are you not going to be with me? Yeah. And the person on the other end will be like, but I'm going with the flow. That's my favorite one.
And I don't think it's a modern phenomenon. I feel it's been there for a long time. We finally have a term for it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm going to leave situationship for a future conversation.
Yes.
But I'm actually going to ask you a question we've been asking all our guests, and I think it'd be interesting to say, is there a particular track or any kind of music that you listen to, and because you are talking to people about their relationships and what's going on in their head, and I've always spoken to any friend or anyone I know who does what you do, saying you got to find time to take a pause and really kind of calm your mind and really kind of reflect, because I'm sure it takes a certain load off your head. So do you turn to music, or is there a certain song or a certain it could be an album that you turn to?
Actually, I turn to music along with an activity. I dance. So and it's often Latin American, and the one that calms me the most is the Spanish acoustic guitar. So I find a playlist and I just play it, and it's just softly playing as an ambient sound in my house. That's the most relaxing for me.
I agree. Spanish guitar is amazing to listen to.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's been fabulous.
Lovely. Yeah, it was lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Likewise, and like I said, I'm pretty convinced this is going to be one of many conversations on this one, and we'll continue to.
Yeah.
And for everyone who sent in questions, thank you for sending in the questions. I feel how you look at relationships is something, it's an evolving beast for all of us, but thank you for answering so many of those questions.
Thank you for having me. It was so nice to be engaged in such a meaningful conversation.